Good afternoon. My name is Donna Fiesel, and I'm your host of The Edge on IC Radio, your source for news and entertainment. You can also find us on television, channel 182, as Charter Communications. That's in local North Alabama. You can also find us syndicated on worldwide television on Abundant TV, found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. And I didn't tell this couple this. We have lots more watchers and listeners right now. We are actually have our own blog spot. And so you can find us on netnewsnetwork.net. So we're really proud to be part of that as well. But thank you again. You guys are really awesome. Thank you so much for watching. And also very special thanks to all of our new sponsors and our sponsors who've been with us a long time. We appreciate you as well. I have Barry and Kathi Holcomb with me right now. It's always a pleasure. And I've been so excited to talk with you guys again. There's always a wonderful topic, and we all need help, especially ministers' families.
Absolutely. Always something to talk about. I mean, if people have learned anything about us, if they've watched, we're never at a loss for words. So we can always talk about something. I think that we share that characteristic with you. So it's great. It's always great to sit and visit. The hour goes by, it seems like, in just about a minute.
It is. It's very instant. Very instant. And I feel for pastors' families. You know, as my dad was a minister. And I'm telling you, it's a different world. And I have to tell you two things I told Phil before we married. I said, first of all, are you going to be a minister? Are you thinking about getting into the ministry? And he said, what would be so wrong with that? And I said, well, you were a minister's kid. You should know. And then he said, and also you're not getting into politics ever, are you? I mean, that's has to be, even for somebody who just really, they're a good person and they want to serve the country. That's two categories right there that I would think would be a tough world.
You draw a lot of criticism in any of those worlds. I mean, pastors do, politicians do, coaches do, referees, umpires do.
Oh, especially the ref.
Of places to be that have inherent difficulties with them. But I'll tell you, as a pastor, I mean, it's a calling from God. I can go back and talk to you about 1985 at Lakeview Baptist Church in Auburn on Easter Sunday morning sunrise service when God called me to preach. And I can always go back to that and know that I wouldn't change it, even as difficult as some things have been.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's really called. Now, my son, is in the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I said, son, just be sure. And he is. And also, his wife is so supportive. My daughter in love is what she is. And her name is Larissa, and reminds me a whole lot of Kathi. They're both really serious about helping those husbands out. And that's what it takes. I mean, you've got to have that in a ministry's family support.
Yeah, I would not be who I am in the ministry without Kathi. It is the team effort. I mean, of course, I'm the pastor. We don't consider her a co-pastor, as some denominations are fine with that. But a pastor's wife is absolutely a must. She can either make your ministry or break your ministry. Mm-hmm. And Kathi makes it really and truly what it is.
She does. I always kind of wondered about that. When I was a kid, we were going to a church, and this guy was pastoring the church. And his wife just seemed to be not supportive at all. In fact, she would actually sit out in the car while he was preaching. And I always, even as a little kid, I thought that a little odd.
It wasn't just that he was a pastor. I can almost guarantee you that there were deeper issues within the marriage. There was something under the surface that people didn't know, that they hadn't disclosed, that just almost certainly made that situation what it was. I've seen it.
I hate to say it, but I always kind of felt it might be on his end.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very well could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for me, there was a calling to, not that I was thinking I'm going to marry a pastor. I mean, I never had that in my mind. Early on, but I just thought I had a calling to ministry. I was planning on going to seminary even before I met Barry, but I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Bear with me while I control the dog.
I didn't really know what I was going to do. I thought about youth ministry and I thought about other things, and I was just seeking the Lord in whatever that would be. And so when I met Barry and knew that he was going to pastor, and we started dating, then it made a lot more sense. So my calling to minister to women, to just a love for the church really was vital, I think, in being happy maybe in the ministry, because it can be hard. I mean, that as a pastor's child.
Mm-hmm. And Larissa says exactly the same thing. She said, because she went to seminary too, and she said, I just wanted to basically just be a better person and just help. I think she'd even thought about, going and traveling other countries and just, using medicine to help people. She didn't know exactly what it was, but she knew there was some kind of a calling.
Sure, absolutely. And it is. I mean, it helps me when, in the bad times, it definitely is something that I remember my calling as well.
We're in a confusing world right now. It's not confusing for us because we know why it's here. And of course, you've heard this said before, we've all read the back of the book, so we know how it ends and we win. But it's confusing for a lot of folks out there because the world is really in a strange place. I've never seen such a time when good was called evil and evil was called good. Mm-hmm. So how can people adapt to that world?
I was thinking about that this morning, and I have a discipleship group tonight that will cover some of those things. We're in 1 Samuel, and it's talking about in, I think, the 8th chapter of how the people had demanded a king. And Samuel, was very offended by that, but the Lord said, no, listen to them and let them have a king. But the argument that people made to Samuel for giving them a king is that we want to be like all the other nations. And so one of the points we'll talk about tonight is how can we as Christians be in this world and not of this world? Because if we can't, there's only one way to escape it, and that's by, passing on and going to heaven, or the Lord coming back for the church. So we have to endure it. But I mean, I certainly don't have to adapt my thoughts and my ways to this world. And I think that's what's being forced on us from every angle, with every ideology. And I'll just, for instance, the transgender ideology that is so prevalent, it is an ideology first and foremost when it comes down to, we're going to make you toe the line on this. And then otherwise it is an emotional disorder. They call it gender dysphoria in all of the diagnostic manuals. So, but we don't have to adapt to them. We have to live. And I think the key is for us to be who we are in Christ and to not give ground on the Bible. We don't back up. We don't compromise the Word of God. Adrian Rogers, the longtime pastor at Bellevue Baptist Church, was challenged by a liberal in our denomination when we were going through a battle over the Bible. And he said, Adrian, if you don't compromise, we'll never get together. And he paused and he said, I told that dear brother, we don't have to get together. We don't have to be united. He said, but one thing I can't do is compromise. And I think I would say that to Christians. Let's love people, but yet not compromise the standards that God gives us in His Word.
Right. And it's all happening. Now, I was a child of the 70s, the 60s and 70s. I liked some of the rock music we had out there. And so I'll just give you an example. So we started watching television. It was on APT, Create Television. Used to be a safe place to go, but it's beginning to turn very liberal now. Yeah. So I was watching a segment with a group I used to like to listen to. Well, they had to start in talking about how they were lesbians, and I didn't even know that. And so these women were all lesbians, and it was like it's just an accepted thing. And I just looked at Phil and I said, can't watch it anymore. I just can't watch it.
Sure. I mean, and if you don't watch it, or if you don't agree, you're labeled. You're labeled a bigot, a transphobe, homophobe, or whatever. So they use these aggressive tactics to hem people into a corner and demand allegiance or at least cooperation and acceptance. And we're called to accept people for who they are, but we don't have to accept their ways. And there is a dividing line between loving the person and then not accepting a lifestyle that's aberrant to the Scripture. And it's a fine line, and a lot of Christians have not figured out how to walk that. I worked with some girls for a couple of years in the Walmart in a particular town in North Alabama, and there were several of them that were lesbians. They've married one another, and I loved them. They knew I loved them, and they knew where I stood, and they respected that. And so, there's a line we have to walk that doesn't include compromise, and it doesn't include hating these people.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes people try to trip you up. Like, I won't argue with people on Facebook, social media. I just don't. I don't see the point. because people have their, now if they ask me and they come in a humble spirit and they really want my advice on something, I'll dish it out there. I'll tell them all day long. But as far as soliciting my advice, I don't, because all you're asking for is an argument. Now, that's just my opinion about it. I don't know if you consider that wrong or right. But if somebody asks me, I will definitely give them my opinion in a nice way. And I always start out, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't say anything else.
Right.
Well, and I agree with that, but I recently fell prey to it, and I did get into a discussion. It wasn't much of a discussion. I saw their viewpoint, and social media has been something that's given Christians a very unique theater for complaining and arguing and grumbling, which the scripture says we're to do everything without arguing and complaining. And so I read something that I had an opinion about, and I answered them, and they did not respond very kindly. Yeah. It was not a good situation, and my fault, and that was to respond at all. And my wife, the wise woman she is, tried to convince me not to do that, and in my stubbornness in my flesh, I did. So it's probably the best policy not to let that be what you fall to. But yeah, I agree with you. Social media has given us that arena where we're behind a keyboard and people can't see us, and we don't have to confront them personally face to face. So we can gripe, complain, grumble, attack, assault, and feel comfortable doing it. And God would probably have much to say about that.
Yeah, I think so too. Can you believe half the show is over?
I can't.
Let's go into a commercial break. We're going to be right back in just a few minutes, and it's a really interesting topic. So hang in there, okay? At Lamone's Mexican Restaurant, located in Henniger, Alabama, and voted Best Mexican Restaurant of DeKalb County, Alabama 2020, we're here to serve you with authentic Mexican cuisine. Order easily online by going to lamonsmex.com or call 256-657-3999 to place your order. We're open Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Whether you're celebrating a cozy date night for two or a celebration for a crowd, at Lamone's you'll love our atmosphere and friendly servers. Thank you for dining with Lamone's Mexican Restaurant. Let Rhonda at Rhonda's Elite Tax LLC take the burden off you for all your tax needs. I know because Rhonda has been taking care of my business since 2013. I feel Rhonda works for me because she knows the direct questions to ask to better benefit my unique business in order for me to get back the biggest refund possible. Rhonda is an ongoing student, and she knows tax laws are in a constant change every year. Call 256-281-9903 for an appointment to take the dread out of getting your taxes done. Rhonda is located at 11968 U.S. Highway 431 in Boaz. Again, that number is 256-281-9903. And let Rhonda's Elite Tax LLC champion your personal and business taxes. Jeff McCurdy of the McCurdy Law Firm has been a public service of this area for over 10 years. McCurdy, a member of the Henniger City Council, serves as prosecutor for the town of Sylvania and was named public defender for the city of Rainsville. The McCurdy Law Firm is located at 17326 Alabama Highway 75 in Henniger to better represent his Jackson and DeKalb County clients. If you need to be represented by a true public servant with proven success, call Jeff at 256-996-8701 or send a private email to mccurdylawfirm@gmail.com. No representation is made that the legal services performed is greater than the legal services performed by other lawyers.
At Liberty Bank, we're all about community, whether it's to help with a charity fundraiser or help families in need. Toys at Christmas or a local football team, we're here for you. You see, we realize the importance of family. Sometimes it's to build a new home or necessary home repairs. We're here for you. If you like the feel of a small town bank with all the conveniences of a big city bank, we're here to serve you. You will find us at any of our convenient locations in DeKalb, Marshall, Etowah, and Blount counties in North Alabama. You can call and speak with any of our friendly staff at 256-659-2175 or check us out on the web at libertybankal.com. And thank you for your support of our community. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.
Designs offers a line of handmade memorial, wedding, and keepsake jewelry that launched back in 1970. I'm a self-trained jewelry designer, and I will work closely with you to create unique designs you can love and treasure for years to come. Whether that be flowers that were used in a funeral arrangement or stones you found on the beach at a memorable trip, call me at 256-659-4319, and let's think of the possibilities.
Okay, we are back. My name is Donna Fiesel, and I am your host of The Edge on IC Radio, your source for news and entertainment. You can also find us on television, channel 182 on Charter Communications and Abundant Television, which is found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Oh, wow. These folks are wonderful. The Holcombs, I'm going to tell you, every time you guys are going to be on the show, and feels the same way as I am. He goes, I always love those shows. And I said, I do too, because see, he's part of a ministry family too. His dad was pastor of a church for years. And sometimes being pastor's kids, you felt like you were kind of left out there to hang, and there was no support. And thank you for bringing that support to a lot of families.
Sure.
Well, it's a need. It's needed probably more than people know, because pastors go through things that people may not be aware of, although the scale and scope of what happens to a lot of ministers. What happened to us in 2012, for instance, in January of 2012, was I was forced to resign from my pastorate by a small, what one author calls a small oligarchy of leaders. These were deacons, and I think they usually fall into a couple of very defined categories. Deacons are elders who see the church as theirs, and even the pastor is someone who just works for them. And so what we went through was life-changing. It's been 11 years now. Mm-hmm. Next January will be 12 years. We've recovered for that, but we see the need out there. And there's a really interesting book. I just want to reference it, if I may. And this is a book called The Wounded Minister. Oh. And it deals with healing from and preventing personal attacks in the church. And I'm not sure if I agree totally with his title, because I think you can heal from those things, but I don't know if there's ever a way to completely prevent them. There's always going to be a segment in the church, and I'm convinced that there's always going to be a certain impact of evil people in the church. And I really wouldn't pull a punch at this point. I think those who personally are just out to ruin pastors, and they're there. I
think so too.
And so it has an impact. It's had a long-term impact. But truthfully, you talk about talking with us, and it's we feel the same way. It's like friends talking with one another. Long-time friends just having a discussion about issues, and that's easy to do among friends. But we felt very isolated during that time. And what we've gone through, we hope will help someone. So part of our ministry that is really grassroots right now, and we're seeking to get that some traction. We're open at any time for any pastor who's been wounded to contact us. We'll be glad to talk with them. We can Zoom call with them. Mm-hmm. We can, we certainly would come to them and talk in person within a certain range. But we'll do anything we can to help ministers. But Guy Greenfield's book deals with the depth of the problem of ministry terminations, and it's pretty interesting. He quoted a 1996 article from Leadership magazine, and back even in 1996, it revealed that 23% of ministers had been fired at least once, and 43% said that it was a faction, usually a very small group of people that forced them to resign. That's what we went through. And then the numbers go up. It's like marriage and divorce and remarriage. 50% of most marriages, or 50% of all marriages, end in divorce. It goes up to 75% of second-time marriages. Would you believe that 41% of congregations who have fired a pastor have done so more than once? And it gets worse among Southern Baptists. So we're Southern Baptists. We're a particular denomination, some 45 to 50,000 congregations across the country who cooperate to do missions and evangelism and church planting and a number of things. Very effective denomination. I'm Southern Baptist by choice. But among Southern Baptists, between 5 and 5.5% of the pastors each year are terminated. So that's between 2,000 and 2,500 ministers every year are forced to resign because of some small faction in the church that runs the church and runs the pastor. It's epidemic, and it's something that I don't know, as Greenfield says, avoiding those attacks. I think you just have to learn to deal with them.
Yeah. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the liberal world, right, that we're living in right now. A small fraction of people who feel like they're not being treated right when they actually are actually running the world right now. And it's almost like the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Yeah. So people, we've raised generations of people that could be a squeaky wheel when they wanted to when they were a child, and now they're running the world. They're running politics. They're running churches. They're running all kinds of things, and that's my indication. It just feels like, not always, but it just feels like it came from that. The way we've raised our kids in the past couple of decades.
Sure.
I think that has something to do with it, but in the church, I think it even is more sinister than that, because the people who are behind these attacks and assaults on many pastors and their families, they're not just squeaky wheels. See, the issue is not that a pastor and members of the congregation disagree from time to time. There are people out there who, Greenfield and others, there are actually books with the title clergy killers. Greenfield identifies these people as clergy killers.
I can see that.
Out to do intentional damage on pastors so that they will leave the ministry. And I don't understand that mentality, other than the fact that we can attribute it to the evil one and the fact that he has people in every church that do his bidding.
Sometimes sitting on the front bench.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and most of the time they're people who are, like I said, members of a deacon body or an elder board who take it upon themselves to rule the church. They actually have some real harsh stances. I've got some notes made. I was looking for some of his notes where he quotes some of these people. For instance, a powerful lay leader once told Greenfield, and this is the guy who wrote the book, he said, "We hire and fire the pastor. We pay him to do what we tell him, the nerve of him to ignore us." And so in churches like that, pastors looked at as a glorified custodian or a chore boy, someone to do our bidding, and that's thoroughly unbiblical. And certainly I think there are pastors who know how to bring it upon themselves. I think there are pastors who can create that, sense of entitlement themselves, a lack of love for the congregation. Certainly sometimes there is warranted criticism leveled toward pastors. I've had some that's very well warranted. And I could just say to people who are preachers, listen to that which is credible. I mean, listen to it and learn from it. Don't check everything off as this is just an attack. But many times it is an attack, and these clergy killers will come at you with all kinds of things. Well, I've had a lot of people that have talked to me, and they say, and then they list things off. And I'll tell you, I think they're consummate liars at that point. Many of them. The one in particular that I think of in our situation told me that he had 100 people who had come to him in our church with complaints. And I tried to narrow it down, and the truth kind of came out. It was 100 things that people had said. But I promise you, he had his notebook sitting there trying to make up things. And everything, literally everything he heard, he turned it into something he could write down. And so there are these people out there who are, what Kenneth Houck defines as antagonists in the church, and he calls them as well clergy killers. And it's an epidemic, and part of our, heartbeat is for those guys and their wives and their kids. See, we've got a grown child who is still affected by this. Doesn't go to church anywhere. It's not in anyone's church. Our granddaughter is not in anyone's church, and we're burdened for that. We want to see that change, but it can be attributed, I think, to the treatment that their dad and mom got.
Yeah. I can totally agree with that. I don't agree with it, but I understand how it can happen, because I've thought back a lot through my life. It's a living wonder that I even dared a church door. Mm-hmm. It really is. I totally get it. And a lot of people have asked me about that. So I was 25 years old when my parents finally got a divorce. They should have done it a long time ago, in my opinion. Just didn't get along with each other. And so after that, I was questioning God. Why? I mean, why is all this happening? And then a little bit later on, a friend of mine whose parents, her dad was a pastor, she came to me and she said, I know you had been going through a rough time, and I'm sorry I didn't say anything to you, because it was happening to her family.
Sure. All right, so that's another issue within this whole topic, and you've really hit an important nerve there, is probably one of the most hurtful things. And as a matter of fact, Guy Greenfield has a chapter in his book called, it's chapter 4, The Minister's Greatest Enemy. It's passive lay people, passive lay leaders.
Absolutely.
Who could stand up and say something or do something or intervene, yet they don't want to rock the boat. And they see the group that has the power, the oligarchy, as he calls it. They are the ones who, they make the decisions. We're just the congregation. They're the deacons. They're the elders. It's their call. And that is truthfully, see, in autonomous congregational polity, which is what most Baptists have. We self-govern, but we have people that we've instilled in positions of leadership. And so those leaders then are seen as the ones who have the only ones who have any power. And so probably some of the biggest hurt we went through were friends in the church who loved us, who said nothing about the injustice of what was happening.
Mm-hmm. That hurts more than, really, I can tell you from my end, that hurts more than the deed that was done to you.
Sure, sure. Well, we even had some people that, and like I said, I mean, I guess I understand it, I do understand it, but we had even some people that wouldn't, come and even try to minister to me, women in the church who I knew cared about me, that I, had friendships with, that somebody had tried to get together, hey, let's meet with Kathi, and just try to encourage her, after this all happened. And they were like, no, we can't do that, because what's that's going to look like? It's going to look like we're taking sides. And, so I don't know. I mean, I guess I look at all this in a little bit more of a simplistic way. Barry is, studying this, and he's working on a doctorate about, us coming up with a following God's leadership on a ministry to pastors who've gone through this. But, I think one of the things too that we have missed, and maybe this is only in the United States of America, but we do not understand what church is. And we've, my son made a comment that church is a business. It's just a business. And, even though that is a horrible thing to say, to a certain degree, it's true in so many people's minds that's what it is, because the main concern that the deacons had was numbers, the number of people and the amount of money that was coming in. So it was like, what are you, Barry Holcomb, producing? What's the end result of what you're doing? And
you're a sales manager. You're a sales manager in a church.
Yes, yes.
One of the characteristics you'll find in churches that have this conflicted situation, these dynamics, is you'll have good people in the church who are looking at what's going on and saying, this is not what the church is to be about. And we had people that they departed because they weren't going to be any part of it. They didn't help us any. They didn't speak up, but they got out of there. And so when you see attendance declining, people are not going to come to a church that's divided and conflicted. And when you see this pattern over and over again, that happens. And unfortunately, that's the case. And then the good people say nothing. There was an 18th century philosopher that said, all that's necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Mm-hmm. And
absolutely.
So I would urge,
we're going to have to call it a day. Can you believe this? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Great topic. Let's go ahead and cut to a commercial break, and you guys are going to come back for another segment. And so anyway, thank you so much for watching The Edge. Wonderful folks right here. The Edge on IC Radio. We'll be back shortly. Bye-bye.